But thanks you all. This is Fishbowl number 10. So I'm feeling happy about that today. So thank you for being here. Greg, you've been a prior Fishbowl, inner Fishbowl member. So thanks for supporting from the outer Fishbowl, if you will. But you'll be getting into it because we got Douglas Ferguson here today, who's an entrepreneur and human-centered technologist. And he's the founder of Voltage Control, an Austin-based change agency that's helped enterprises spark, accelerate, and sustain innovation. He specializes in helping teams work better together through participatory decision-making and design-inspired facilitation techniques. He's helped transform teams from Nike, US SOCOM, Google, the Air Force, Apple, Adobe, Dropbox, Fidelity, VRBO, Liberty Mutual, the list goes on. Doug is a thought leader and master facilitator in design sprints, innovation acceleration, team alignment, meeting systems, culture transitions, and change transformations. He's also the author of 4 books: Magical Meetings, Beyond the Prototype, How to Remix Anything and Start Within. He was published in Forbes Fast Company, Innovation Leader, and a regular contributor of the Future Shapers. He publishes a weekly podcast called Control the Room. So motivated by the mission to rid the world of horrible meetings and offer meaningful, magical meetings in their workplace, Voltage Control is calling upon fellow facilitators to transform meeting innovation culture. From free weekly community meetups to Control the Room, the annual Facilitator Summit, Voltage Control is building a community of facilitators to change the world. Douglas is also active in the Austin startup community, where he serves on the board of several nonprofits, mentors startups, and advises early stage ventures. Prior to founding Voltage Control, Douglas held CTO positions at numerous Austin startups, where he held product and engineering teams. When he's not facilitating, you can probably find Douglas working on his modular synth, boxing, and doing Pilates. Heck yeah. So welcome to the Inner Fishbowl, Douglas from Voltage Control. Welcome. Happy to have you.
Wow, you went long on the bios. You guys know everything there is, except where I was born in Halifax County, Virginia. That's the only party left out. And I'm really curious. I want to know. I'm kind of intrigued now. Fast community sounds pretty awesome. So I need to noodle that for a little bit more.
I know.
It sounds fun. So we're gonna talk about facilitation today as a core concept, which became kind of a passion of mine as I started to really codify some of the observations I had as a CTO, and being really enamored with a lot of the kind of techniques we would use in software development to make teams more effective. And then, buying books like Think Wrong, and, starting to use design sprints with my team, and then leaving the startup world and starting to do some of the stuff in my consulting practice, and then starting to really realize, like, a lot of these communities are kind of siloed a bit. It's like everyone learns a thing and then sees the world of facilitation through the lens of that thing. So I got really curious about just looking across the horizon at those different methodologies and different kind of bodies of work, and thinking, what are some of these core facilitation skills, and how might we support people on that journey? And so that's really kind of been the focus of our community. And we do a facilitation lab every week, and we built a certification around it, and it's just been really the focus of what we do. So I'm excited to share today a template that we created that is part of a simple little public workshop that we do as kind of to introduce people to some of these ideas and get the conversation going. And I really find it fun. I'm really glad that there are seasoned facilitators here, and maybe there's folks that are newer to it. I would love to see in the chats really quick, and maybe we could maybe just really quickly, we'll use our fingers. So 5 meaning like I've been doing this for a long time. I'm very confident. 1 being I just started, and it kind of scares me to actually get in front of the room. So just hold up. Where are you guys? 0. Andy, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. So Cuz instead of 1. Cuz I saw you in action. I think you might be a 2. All right. So people are feeling pretty green. And with this small of a group, it's going to be kind of fun because we're going to work the template together. And I created a template called the Facilitator Personal Growth Plan. And it's basically a way of, we're just going to have a conversation around what do we think our strengths are? What do we think our weaknesses are? Where are there room for improvement? And what next step might I take? And it's really fun to do this. I use it as a coaching tool when we're doing one-on-one coaching with facilitators. It's fun to do it in this public group setting because we can hear what other people's strengths and other people's weaknesses are, which is really fun to lean on because oftentimes like strengths aren't necessarily always perfect and weaknesses aren't always just bad, right? And often your weakness is someone else's strength, your strength is someone else's weakness. So like learning and hearing from them around those things can be really eye-opening, and also it can be a better way of networking, because when you realize like, oh wait a second, we can help each other out on our journey, then you can build commitments around that. So I'm going to just share a couple slides here just to anchor in a little bit on what I mean by facilitation. I'm going to set up the activity, and then we're just going to spend a lot of time talking, and we're going to use the template as a focal point for the dialogue and kind of what comes out. And we'll just spend a lot of time together just kind of discussing the stuff and just talking personally. I might split us up into some breakouts, but with this this small of a group, I think we might just end up just having some small group discussions with ourselves. So we'll see how it unfolds. So that is the template. And of course, my Stream Deck is malfunctioning. So let me, why is that?
Now, in preparation for this, I think, and it was kind of in the marketing that we pushed out for this is Douglas, you and I had this discussion about like when you jump into facilitation and you try to get those strategic benefits out of it, and how this kind of goes back to the fundamentals that kind of help a facilitator out if in any methodology. Is that right? Remember that conversation we were having?
Yes, that's right.
And
that's right.
And that's kind of what intrigued me about kind of bringing this topic up, is just because I've been facilitating a little bit here and there, and I've noticed those things come out in my facilitation skills where I lean so heavily on the tactics of the methodology, and then once I get to the room, and the execution or like the reactions don't happen the way I envision them, or if it's a virtual space, there's just some things that aren't talked about or trained about or even discussed that a seasoned facilitator like Greg, for instance, who held up 5 fingers, who's can just naturally do those things. And so I'm excited to like have a 5-fingered facilitator in here with closed fists to talk about those.
So I'm not sure. Thank you for that context. I'm just going to bring these up in a browser because unfortunately these slides are not working on the iPad like they're supposed to. So I'm not sure what happened. So we're just going to kind of wing it. Let me just jump ahead here in the spirit of time. So here are a few key points. I talked about, defining facilitation. So we're going to spend a moment just talking about what that means to us and just as a word. And then we're going to talk about what facilitation superpowers might be, explore some areas of improvement, and then you'll end up with a personal plan or commitment out of that. So it's kind of some of the stuff I alluded to there. So let's just jump into what is facilitation. So would love to hear someone define this. So anybody want to jump in and just rip out a quick definition or a word even that comes to mind when you think facilitation?
Collaboration.
Collaboration. Okay.
Shepherding.
Shepherding. Tell me more. What comes to mind when you think shepherding?
We had a meeting this past Tuesday that I was kind of the facilitator for, at least the initial parts of it. And so I did kind of just built out the schedule and helped coordinate on the schedule and collaborate on where things should logically flow. And then kind of did the, hey, I'll go ahead and set the stage. I think I did like just something goofy to start things off, get everybody laughing together, that little shortcut to trust, and then try to keep the momentum flowing as it was going, kind of keep that positive flow on the day. So it's just that not micromanaging every little bit of it, but just being kind of like right there, the hands hovering over the steering wheel on the self-driving meeting, so that every once in a while you can just gently nudge it back where it needs to go and then disappear.
I love that.
And I like that. I like that the hands over the steering wheel, just like gently. That's a good visualization.
And Rob, you mentioned a guide on the side.
Yeah, I come from like an education background. We always talk about like the sage on the stage versus the guide on the side. And so I think facilitation is a little bit more of a model of, I'm not teaching you or kind of being didactic about something, but I'm harnessing the ideas of the group to guide them towards some kind of outcome.
Love that. And someone mentioned trust and flow. That's probably you, Cuz, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I was just listening in to Chris when he was speaking, trying to just throw those in there. And those are, trust is a big one too. When I think about it, because if a room doesn't trust you, then how are they going to be trusting this new form of having a meeting or creating a process or innovating? And so trust is an interesting one.
And Brian mentioned enabling, which kind of was aligns with what Rob was saying. Brian, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, I'm thinking just enabling the quiet people to speak and kind of manage the dominant personalities, and basically just creating the opportunity for everyone to have equal participation in it.
Yeah, I love that. I think some of the old school rhetoric around, Cuz just wrote safe. That's the classic facilitator language. They talk about creating safe places or, holding space. Shannon, anything you'd like to add on?
All right. So I feel like I'm an outsider on this. Didn't know what I was getting into because I'm about to separate from the military, and I've always found myself in the guy who likes to stay in the brainstorming session and bring up the new ideas where everybody else has moved on. And I'm seeing all this, what we call AFWorks and SoftWorks. So I linked in with another one of your colleagues, Daniel Holter, I think his name is.
Yep.
And he passed me this link. And right now I'm just trying to get personal training into your guys' industry. So I hope you don't mind that I'm in here. I'm taking notes, and I'll hit anybody up who wants to give me a career path or a training path. When I was in JSOC, I was too busy to take the free class that came by like once a quarter. But now I found myself at headquarters AMC, and they're like a dinosaur compared to JSOC. So I already forget what you asked originally, but I felt that was
that's
necessary.
really, thanks for sharing. I think it's this is part of this is part of it, right? Like being on the journey, being curious. I think asking questions and being vulnerable. So like the fact that you're in front of the group willing to say, hey, I'm not quite sure, I'm trying to figure this stuff out. I think that's modeling the good traits of facilitators. So, and being able to do that, to model those behaviors in front of others is also great, right? Because we don't always, it's like, oftentimes we'll have students ask us, how do I make someone do X, Y, or Z? And my answer is always like, you don't. It's like, you can model it. I love to tell people or ask, how do you make a plant grow? right? You can only set the conditions and encourage it, but you can't make it. And Greg had some very professorial points here around all the key things. Greg, you want to elaborate on any of that? And then Andy, you got some stuff too before we move on.
Yeah, so I think it's, you know, it's it's a lot of things, right? It's not one thing. The role of being a good facilitator. I agree with everything that people were saying. So I was really yes-anding, building on top of those thoughts. You know, one of the things that I think is really valuable as a facilitator is that because you are, you know, moving around the room or moving around the group and hearing a lot of different things, sort of you have a responsibility to make connections where other people might not be able to make connections, to start to see patterns emerging, bring those into sharp relief, push for divergent thinking when you need more divergence, right? Push for convergence when convergence is what the group needs, where they need to get to. I agree with this idea of building trust, and somebody talked about this sort of dealing with the difficult personalities in the room, that sort of thing. So that's where that sort of firefighter and lion tamer come in. You've got to both, you know, put out the fires that emerge, stay cool, like when stuff starts going wrong, and get the most out of people who have maybe are resisting or pushing back, but have something to offer. And then I think this energy creator is really important, and I think that different facilitators create different kinds of energy. So, you know, you all have seen me in a room. I tend to have this sort of mode of I need energy to feel energized as a facilitator. I need to be getting something back from the room to sort of keep myself going as a facilitator. So I sort of feel like the energy I put out is the energy I get back. I really like being with other people who lead groups who are kind of quiet and softer and maybe not quite as in people's face. It's a very different style than mine. So I do think there's that sort of thinking about what's the dynamic that you want to have in a room, what's going to be most productive, and then making sure you've got the right sort of person with that kind of energy doing that work, right? So.
Yes, and you know, seeing you specifically in motion, but also like the spaces you create, which I think is like the different levels of facilitation, right? Where you know, I think that novice entry level facilitator, you're practicing in a place of work or a place that maybe you're not in control of the environment, and so slowly you begin to kind of unravel all these techniques and benefits that come from adjusting the environment and creating a space that, you know, subconsciously creates that psychological safety or dims the lighting a little bit so it lowers the shoulders and, you know, offer those key things. So as everybody kind of moves through their facilitation journeys, it's nice to kind of pick things from different facilitators, and that's why I really enjoy these fishbowls, is because we get to learn from so many different facilitators and to see, because, you know, just like Douglas having you know, that his tech is just so impressive to me, and so just little things like that, yeah. It's still impressive, but you know, those are the things that I also think the mechanics of facilitation that I'm currently like really tuned into, and so I've learned a lot from both of you. So
it's funny you talked about the idea of creating space, and I think that there's the idea of sort of metaphorically creating space and being sensitive to that, sort of creating a safe space, or creating a space where sort of either functional or emotional work needs to be done. I also really am conscious of the physical space that we work in, and try to shift that space as much as possible, because the energy changes when you go from one, you know, either seated to standing, in one room into another space, outdoors to indoors. So there's that sort of you know, responsibility, I think, for creating a place and a space where people feel like they can work together And then there's taking advantage of whatever the physical environment is that you find yourself in.
Mhm.
There's another point there too, which is I remember we were doing a workshop for the Air Force, and we walk into this training facility, and the room is like just filled with these metal desks. There's literally like barely any room to like walk in the room, and then there's this narrow hallway between the desks, and each desk barely had room for chairs to squeeze in and sit down, and we wore jackets because we had never met the team, so we weren't quite sure what the like MO was, so we kind of just dressed up a little more than normal. So we took our jackets off, rolled up our sleeves, and we start stacking all these desks. They're heavy as shit. They're probably at least 100 pounds each, and we're stacking them and stacking them. So there's this tower, and they saw us doing it. So then they went and grabbed cadets to help us. And so we were like stacking all these things so we could create a space that was conducive to come together. Because otherwise it was going to be like this really cramped environment for them maybe to take notes. And there wasn't going to be any creative like energy.
Yeah. I've been in those rooms a lot.
Andy, what's the gyroscope about?
Like the first thing that I was able to grasp on, I'm reading Loon Shots right now. And I was just thinking about in World War II, pre-guided rocket development, when the Germans finally like developed the V2, it was considered like impossible by what was understood, by the physics, right? But when they developed the gyroscope, it actually you didn't have to be accurate because you could correct, right? It's not super polished. It's just like I was thinking in terms of like having the ability to keep track on a target and readjust as the course goes along in a session.
I love that.
Super left field, but
super cool thinking. I love it. Well,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
really cool.
I'm gonna share a few other notes here that'll help us kind of get started on the template, and then I would love to continue this type of dialogue as we kind of step through each step of the template. I'm gonna switch over modes here so that it'll be a little more conducive to the way the tech's behaving, so that I don't have to troubleshoot on the fly. So bear with me 1 second. Okay, so the facilitation spectrum, and I think this is like interesting to think about, because typically people will often gravitate toward the strategic impacts of facilitation. They'll think to themselves like, oh, I need strategic planning, or I need procedure design, or I need some process implementation, or there's some workflow that needs to change. And then if they're really lucky, or I would say if they're advancing a little bit more, they're kind of getting a little bit more into the tactical, right? And they're thinking about things like, oh, we should probably categorize things, we should prioritize things, we should generate some ideas, we should gather some facts, and do some inquiry and some problem solving. But if we really want to think about what makes the act of facilitating extra special in the moment, then we got to get to these foundational elements of facilitation, which are things like questioning, focusing, labeling, linking. Greg called this connecting, and that's where you see someone saying something and someone else saying, and if you can link those two things together, then it can be more meaningful to them. Anyone ever been in a meeting? I was plagued by this throughout my career, and it's coming really handy as a facilitator. But just being in meetings where two people are saying the same thing but disagreeing, and it's like that was like my superpower for my entire career. I'm sitting there going, okay, like you two are saying the same thing, and so I'll say, hey, Bob, you're saying X, Y, Z. And then Susan, hey, you're saying ABC. Okay, yeah, let's think about this. There's like, and it just like bringing out the awareness and the alignment there is what we refer to as linking. And the labeling is really powerful, and modeling. So what are these core kind of skills? Even, building consensus, And by the way, some people will say consensus is bad, but I think the people that say consensus is bad are people that conflate unanimity with consensus. So by consensus, I don't mean that we all agree. I mean that we're all comfortable with proceeding. So can we get to that point where we're okay? So I'm going to blast us to the superpowers here, and I'm just going to share a few examples so you know what I mean by superpowers. And here, I think we're probably all familiar with Superman in this cohort. Yeah, and everyone know it. Superman, so kryptonite and superpowers kind of make sense.
Yep.
Always had to check. That's another thing in this day and age with like more global audiences. We really got to think about the cultural impacts and the diversity in our group and how we're holding space for them and acknowledging we might need to shift language. So superpowers, some examples, not limited to this, but I just want to kind of just seed some of it. You might be a motivator, a guide, a questioner, a bridge builder. That already came up when we talked about what is facilitation. Are you the clairvoyant? Are you the one that kind of can see where the future's going and kind of maybe nudge things? Another thing that came up in Greg's that I wanted to touch back on was often you'll hear about facilitation being unbiased. And while I agree with that sentiment from we should not be pushing toward a specific answer and we should allow, different outcomes, we are responsible for an outcome. We are responsible for taking care of the group. So we're unbiased in certain regards. So that clairvoyant can maybe sometimes peer into the future. Hey, where is this conversation headed, and is it healthy for us? The taskmaster, that could be good or bad, right? That could be your strength and you're really good at it, or it could be a weakness because maybe you push people too far. Praising can be a really strong superpower. So with that, I want to switch us over. I'm going to switch back to the mural here. And of course, let's see, I'll get this other, my transitions are a little funky now with this not working quite right. But so this is a mural. I'm going to drop in the link for y'all that know mural, but if you don't, I'll live note take as well. But ideally we can just move in parallel and we're not slowed down by the speed of my typing. So we're going to start in this upper left-hand quadrant.
Douglas, we're seeing it looks like some Slack stuff over on the screen right now. So.
Oh, the sharing, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Sharing still going. I'm a little thrown
Good
off
call,
my
Greg.
game. I'm thrown off my game because
No worries.
Because the OBS is malfunctioning at the moment. So there we go. All right. So we're going to just think about superpowers. So anybody want a quick, who doesn't know mural or is having trouble? So if you're willing and curious, you can click on the link. You can use your scroll bar to zoom in and zoom out, and you can double click to create stickies. But I'm also going to zoom in here so you can kind of see what's typing. And if you're if you're stuck, I can coach you real quick, or just feel free to just yell out something and I'll add it in for you. Anyone not able to get into the mural and want to just maybe shout out some superpowers that you have as a facilitator?
Yeah, I'll pull one out there, networking.
Networking? All right, so if you feel like you've exhausted most of your ideas, I would say maybe just start making some simple clusterings, just grouping things together if they seem to relate. I even see someone drew a little line indicating some relational stuff there. So maybe just take a moment just to visually organize stuff, however you see fit. No rules, just whatever comes to mind. Just nudge them around, just see what surfaces as we kind of play with it a little bit.
There we go. I was wondering where the music was.
Yeah. I was almost afraid to do any other tech stuff because it's like my system's being so ornery today. I think it's like ask. Oh, we got someone in the waiting room. I think it was asking, upset that I was doing something on a Friday.
Sorry, I'm not watching I'm participating. I'm not watching the waiting room.
Yeah.
Did you get it?
Yeah,
Did you get it?
Yeah, I got him.
Okay. Okay.
That was Dylan, I think. Welcome, Dylan. I'm gonna drop the Zoom link in the the mural link in the Zoom chats. Unfortunately, there's no way to make chat messages resilient. All right, let's see here. Anyone want to point out anything you're noticing? Any superpowers that surprised you, or anything that surfaced as you were personally kind of adding stuff in?
I think cheering for the shy guy is pretty cool. I'd never thought about deliberately trying to. I think I always worry about too much energy directed at that person and shutting them down. So you're like trying to strike that balance to like bring them on board a little bit, and give them that safety to community participate.
Yeah, one fun way to do that is if you're doing small groups, because sometimes those individuals tend to be more vocal in smaller groups, and so pairing someone up that's outspoken in the big group with someone who's not outspoken in the big group can sometimes the quiet person will influence the outspoken person, and then they'll speak on their behalf. It's uncanny. You bring them back from small group and they'll be like, you know what Johnny was just telling me. What else did y'all, what are you noticing? Analytical thinking, systems thinking? Were those the same person?
No, I think I was analytical thinking. I didn't do some systems though.
How's analytical thinking been helping in your facilitation?
Yeah, it helps you remain objective to what people are saying and just get into the reasons why they're saying that, I would suppose.
Yeah. The fast processing can be really powerful if you're able to synthesize quickly and kind of turn on a dime and whatnot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I see planner. Anyone want to talk about how planning's kind of helped you as a facilitator?
Like trying to lay out things in advance very cleanly and get my, I think I did like cues doing one of the mountain exercises. So I had like little numbered, no joke, post-it notes of numbered steps to keep me in line, that it's like, first you do this, then you do this. So I didn't have to think about it, because I could just look at the post-it and be like, that's right, we're on step 3. And I just pulled them off as I went through. So that was my own little secret thing. And I also did some enlisting help from the audience. So we had a navigator whose life is all about timing, as one of the people at the table. So I made them the timekeeper for the whole thing, because their whole life they're very time conscious, just by virtue of their existence. So that just kind of planning that in advance, but kind of approaching them early on and being like, hey, I'd really like your help today with some of the timekeeping. Would you be able to help me out with that? So it wasn't like I threw it at them on the spot. It was, they had some time to think about it and just kind of feel relaxed about it. So it was fun.
Who haven't we heard from? Anyone want to share your superpower before we move on to kryptonites?
I think my superpower came to fruition here, because I see everybody cluster theirs together, and I'm out by myself in red over there with the astronaut. So
I couldn't
sorry.
figure out how to do the lines in Mural. I only know Miro.
Yeah. So
UI is
yeah.
trying to loop.
Apparently, I'm not a team player here. I'm just over by myself.
I still like it. I'm looking.
But
You're orbiting the hairball.
I'm orbiting the hairball. You know that if you haven't read that book, please do. It's probably my top 5 of all times. But yeah, it's, you know, I connected with the message there, because I'm always trying to do things very different, new, exploring. Even when I'm given a framework, I'm trying to incorporate it differently, or kind of like, you know, I was a flying crew chief, and so I became kind of like was flown around the world, and I had to just fix aircraft with what I had, and so I became kind of a MacGyver, and so I see that carrying over into my facilitation, where I'll just make do with what I have and maybe use things in new ways, or try them in new ways. And I wrote down there, like, the first jumper, like, you know, if you ever go to a cliff and there's like, everybody's like looking down like, oh man, you know, I wonder if it's steep enough. I'm just like sprinting. I'm like, yeah, it's steep enough, you know, and I'll be the first to jump. And so,
I'll let you go.
So that, I feel, is I've caught myself being in that situation with facilitation as well. And so it comes out for me, I just get used to things not being so polished, which is a benefit, but it's also, you know, something you just continue to learn with. So
an interesting thing I'm noticing, you know, Chris talked about planning and being ready ahead of time. You talked about MacGyvering, which is a little more intuiting versus planning. Not that you don't plan, but that might be more your happy place, you know? And so that's an interesting juxtaposition, right? And knowing that those two styles could be okay, and how do you show up authentically? And even for people that, I always recommend that, you know, it's always good to plan and have intention, know what we're going to do, but it can be really helpful to, once you make a plan, throw it away and make a second plan, and throw it away and make a third plan. And by the time you've done it 3 times, it doesn't matter what happens, you'll probably be prepared for it. And it sounds like, because like you kind of like have that natural, just, I can react in the moment. I think it can be good just to think through those things ahead of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you nailed it with, I think there's some productive friction that's created between planning and preparation, right? You know, planning and executing a plan versus, hey, there's plans there. We've thought about it. We've prepped for it. We've, you know, understood different pathways to get to the expected outcomes, or at least the desired outcomes that we want. But there's still so many things unknown as we get into a room, or we get into a space, or we get around personalities. And there's, you know, even just driving to a facilitation, so many things could happen. And so, like, there's just so many things that you can't plan for. And so for me, you know, staking down on a plan and saying, this is what we're going to do, almost prepositions this thing in my head that says, okay, you can't veer off the plan. But so I would just say, like, you know, the plan is great, but having one just means you're more prepared to deal with the uncertainties that come with facilitation. And I like that. I like that feeling of like, oh man, we might not have planned for exactly this, but I'm going to use this other thing that we planned for something else, and I'm going to mix it together and make it work here. So I think that's kind of
reason I don't like to give my agenda to my clients, because if you do that, then they're sitting there looking at the agenda going, okay, when are we going to do this? And when are we going to do that? And we're not there to like run activities. We're there to get to some kind of outcome, right? And so if we see the need to swap something out on the fly, we should be able to do that without it being disruptive. I'd much rather get 3/4 of the way to our goal and only do, like, you know, I'd rather do 3/4 of the activities and be like on track to our goal than to do all the activities and just be way off the mark. So it's something to think about. So I want to ask about one of these before we move on to the kryptonites, and that's the button pusher. Anyone want to talk about how button pushing is like?
Oh, that was me. That's like instigating, getting people to engage, right? So like a little bit of sometimes emotional manipulation to get someone to actually like show up, you know, as a contribute.
Yeah.
And I think we saw that in our last workshop together. But it's very strategic. I'm very impressed with your button pushing abilities. Very witty on the fly.
Awesome. Cool. Well, let's take a look here at the number 2, which is the kryptonite. So just jump over to the right. And again, if you're having trouble with the interface and just want to yell stuff out, that's fine too. But what's holding you back, or difficult people sometimes pops up here for new facilitators. But what kinds of things do you run into that you're like, oh, I need to grow here, or I really struggle when this pops up? Today, my kryptonite is OBS.
What's OBS, Douglas?
Oh, it's open broadcasting software. So it's open source controller that allows me to do stuff like this.
Okay.
And for some reason, my iPad, which I'm got my slides all set up on, is not OBS is not playing well for some reason. Lack of confidence. I definitely see that a ton. Maybe the number one thing that we hear. Perfectionist. Interesting. Bad food. So, like, okay, I'm really curious about this. Like, I know I want to give you all time to write in more, but that one, I'm probably going to start off there. I'm really curious. I'm going to be quiet and let y'all think. And anyone shout out if you can't type in the mural. I'll jot in your kryptonites, or drop them in the chats, and I'll pop them in. Also, I'd love that people were dragging in images and icons and stuff. So if that's your jam, go for it. And I'll give another minute here, and then we'll do a little debrief, or we'll do a little organization and then debrief.
Can't spell fear.
All good. I'm on it. And I just cut and pasted. No fear. All right. Let's go ahead and start getting those organized. If you have more that pop to mind, feel free to add them. Let's see if there's any that kind of bear similarity or seem to go together. One thing I'm seeing is that some of these are like external factors and some of them are internal factors. Because when you think about, and see Jennifer, thanks for jumping in. Some of them are internal and some of them are external. You know, like so imposter syndrome would be, and lack of confidence would be an internal, whereas I'm seeing others like bad food and whatnot. There's another as well. So that's fascinating. Dichotomy.
Which is true. I mean, like, nutrition is important when you're up in front of people.
You gotta feed to succeed.
Yes. Cool. I'm gonna dig in here and we can start doing a little debrief and chatting. The bad food one. That one's really curious to me because when I first read it, I was like, oh, are you bad at selecting food for your participants, or are you bad facilitator when bad food is put upon you? So I'd love to hear more about that.
That was me. I think that what we put in the people who we're going to work with is going to affect how engaged and able they are to do the work. So if you're in an environment where you don't have any control over what people are going to eat, or where the options are quite bad, I know that can be kryptonite. Like, oh, suddenly the entire room is going into a food coma because they ate chicken soaked in gravy for lunch, and so everybody wants to pass out after lunch, and you're like, okay, so suddenly it's really hard to get people energized and moving again. Or they've eaten crap all morning and suddenly the sugar depression kicks in and they're not able to function anymore. So there's the food, again, the food in that physical space are super, to me, can really, I hate walking into a hotel. I put both of those, the bad food and the bad space. Like going into a hotel conference room, when somebody says we're going to have a meeting in a hotel conference room, I'm just like, shit, that's the worst. Do we really need to do it? And you end up with the facilities manager who won't let you put anything on the wall or take the tables and tilt them up or doing that. So I've learned to do everything you can to fight for high quality, good, energizing food, and then to ask forgiveness from facilities managers, not permission. Just do it, and then beg them later to forgive you for taking their tables and turning them on their side to make them into easels for posters.
You bring up a good point. So many people think, oh, why take on the burden of the extra logistics of bringing in our own food or working with they want to go with the full services venue so they can just check the box and not worry about it, but it makes a big difference. And the food that they're gonna give you or the options you have are not only crazy expensive, but not always the best for the brain. Let's see, what else came up for folks? Imposter syndrome. Anyone want to talk about that?
Yeah, that was me. That's just like questioning the validity of your contribution. which is not a good place to start.
Mm. Well, you're getting props from Cuz earlier in the meeting, so it seems like you're doing some stuff good. So, it's I think also as a facilitator, just reminding that, hey, we don't have to be responsible for the content. We just
Right.
have to create the space. So it's actually can be quite liberating.
Well, and I think one of the also interesting things that is something that would contribute to that line of thinking would be like Andy, starting off kind of like the beginner's luck thing, or like the new perspective in the room. Like, we're not going to get great insights if there's like 5, if this room is filled with 5s, meaning, seasoned facilitators.
Yeah, no diversity.
Some of the best, insights, yes ands, aha moments come from that new perspective, somebody kind of voicing up. One of the fishbowls we had, because we this is kind of our forward facing event, so anybody's welcome. And we had a participant join from Las Vegas, and she was a manager of a casino and the slot machines. She was a slot machine, somebody's in control of that. And the questions specifically that she asked were so out of line with what I was used to, that it was a big contribution, because it kind of shook it up a little bit. And so if that's something that you can find some positivity in, or find some confidence in, is that when you're in the room, specifically your contributions do add a lot.
I use it as my signal to like push through and do it anyway, but it tends to be different.
For sure.
All right, maybe a few more. Anyone have anything bubble up that and it's really helpful as we get into the next few stages. If you share something out loud, you're going to get more out of it from a commitment standpoint. So really encourage. I think we haven't heard from Chris or Brian. So anyone who hasn't spoke up on the kryptonites, jump in here.
Yeah, I had the perfectionist thing, because that was one of my previous bosses was like, dude, just get to good enough. Just get to good enough. And I've kind of kept that in my head over the last like year and a half, that it doesn't have to be. I'd probably be going through here straightening out stickies if I was all alone, but except for that one. But no, but that's just, that's that risk of I've tried to work on that, trying to just get to a point that it's like, this is going to be fine. It's like, I really like the idea of the 3 plans, and throwing away in between, because I think it kind of like, it's like, get it all out of your system now, and then just go execute. I think that's fun.
Yeah. Brian, saw you on mute.
Y'all already hammered out a lot of mine were basically the shyness, kind of lack of confidence. Not sure what more elaboration needs to be happening on that, because we all feel it.
Yeah. I would say the best way to combat that is practice. Finding moments where maybe it's lower stakes, and just trying stuff to the point where like, oh, this is no big deal. When it feels like driving a car where you're like, oh, wait, I get paid for this. It's like, then you don't. And in fact, my point earlier about you're not responsible for the content. Unless you're training, right? But if you're literally coming in and setting up. In fact, one of our golden rules of facilitation is connection before content. So even if there is a content there, if we're building connection and bridging, and you're there creating that for folks, and they even slightly attribute that to you, any roughness in the process, or any crudeness in the approach, or they're gonna forgive you real quick, because they're gonna any appreciation they have.
That's true.
Here's another little data point for you. There's a really good book by Chip and Dan Heath called The Power of Moments, and they shared some research by Disney And what Disney found was that if they were to rate Disney guests after an experience, they could and also rate them all throughout the day. They could take all the ratings from the day of their visit and mathematically compute the score they would give them the next day. And what they do, the equation's really fascinating. They take the first score in the morning, they take the last score of the day, and they take the highest score throughout the day, and they average those together.
That's crazy.
So it doesn't matter how low it gets, as long as it starts well, ends well, and you have a high point, people are fine. So again, if you lack confidence, that's another tip I would give you, is like really think about how you're going to start strong, end strong, and have a high point. And then that also reduces some of the stress, right? Because it's like, I just got to get those 3 things right.
Yeah,
It's like,
focus on the peaks.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cool. Who else? Let's hear from, I don't know if we heard from
Douglas, I
Shannon.
was going to say,
Yeah.
if I could chime in, I kind of had the opposite of Chris. I think I put an over reliance on winging it. Like I taught college for several years, and so I'm very used to like going into a class with like a very loose outline of what I'm going to talk about, and so it's kind of like trying to figure out, okay, to what extent should I plan? Because I'm not someone who likes to over prepare for things, just because I feel like sometimes it's diminishing returns, but I sometimes swing too far in the other direction of like, I'll just be like, oh yeah, I'll figure it out while I'm in there. And so I think that can be the challenge, is like finding that sweet spot of like having an outline with some places for movement, but not getting frustrated if I'm going off track, right? Like over planning or under planning. So just trying to figure that out.
Yeah, those are 2 things that we have to hold in balance, right? And I'm a big fan of intuiting and going with the flow, but I think being clear about the expectation and intention ahead of time is super critical. Because if we're not clear, if we don't clarify that for ourselves and we let that be totally emergent, that means our participants aren't clear about it. And that's one of the number one reasons for dysfunction in meetings and sessions, is that people don't understand why they're there and what's expected of them. Because like if you've got half the room thinking that we're having a strategic conversation, the other half the room thinking we're having a tactical conversation, and 1/4 of the room is thinking that we're going to make a decision, and another quarter is thinking, oh, we're just going to talk about things and make a decision later together, and then another quarter is thinking, oh, we're going to share some info, but the boss is going to make the decision. You can imagine how like none of those people are going to be happy, because at some point, something's going to go some way that they weren't expecting. And so just being clear on some of those high level things, I think is pretty important, because otherwise we can't communicate. So yeah, I don't know. It's like, it's always a balance. Excellent. Let's see. Was it Shannon and Dylan left? Anything you want to share? I know Shannon, you're just kind of learning and stuff, but
Yeah, I'm just kind of learning, but I'm thinking, in my head, I'm thinking both at the strategic end, working at the tactical level. But yeah, you want to encourage people to have ideas and to think of something that maybe you haven't thought about. So anything to bring them out of that, and to be aware of these, your kryptonite, so that way you can not do that. And I like to try to think sometimes that I'm the guy in the room or that doesn't want to kill an idea, because you never know, might not work in this situation, but it could very well work in another situation. Or you may have seen another customer who would think that this is a great idea. So I guess the idea is just to keep the ideas flowing and facilitate them back to the target. But I don't know if you save it or shelve it for another time.
Greg has an awesome concept called the topics nominated. Some people call it the parking lot or what have you. There's all sorts of different tools for kind of putting stuff aside, but not but not just killing it. But at the same time, I think that's something to really dial in, because another thing I was hearing under the surface a little bit there is, if I got the correct read on it, which I might not have, was that maybe you lean more towards let's keep everything there and not let anything die. And sometimes we do have to kill the darlings in the spirit of progress, right? We do have to start converging. And so if that's something that that could be a kryptonite potentially. Not sure, because you're just telling a little bit of the story there, but if that is something that could be something to think about, is like there is a time and place to lean into, like, okay, we have to move on.
It could be similar to some of the rules you see in like debate clubs: attack the argument, not the person.
Mm-hmm.
Because idea fairies are fragile, but they spit out a lot of stupid ideas.
Well, yeah, I love
What's the
this idea.
fairies?
We have one of the ground rules we like to share is hard on ideas, soft on people.
That's nice too. Yeah, I like that.
One of the other things, and what's nice about something like Mural or these digital boards like we're using, is that you have the archive, right? So everything that gets generated persists. And I think reminding people
That's
that
true.
what we do, even if we're doing work in the room and we're using Post-its and posters and that sort of thing, we always photo document. And then we make that photo documentation available to the group, because I think that Shannon's right. It's like there could be something really good. When this moment comes where we need to converge on something, we need to make a choice. We're going from 100 ideas, we're choosing 3 to move forward, but sometimes there's something in that 97 that we left behind that's actually worth mining. What I found is that teams, especially project teams that are using facilitated workshops as a way of progressing their work, like to have that output to go back and dig through and sort of see, what was that thing that we were looking at? There was something in there, right? So I kind of like, if I'm sweeping stuff off the cutting room floor, I want to put it in a digital folder. I don't want to. Honestly, when we first started doing this, we were using physical posters. I had rolled. I saved everything, and I had like rooms full of rolled posters, and then it was just like crazy. You never go back to it. It's impossible to sort. It's impossible to work with. So some of these digital tools like Miro really make it much more efficient, or at least just using your iPhone and photo documenting as you go along.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was just going to jump in saying that the biggest thing that I can kind of think in mind is when we start off with existing constraints, and then you only allow yourself to operate down one path based on, like, if it's manning, like it has to be a pilot that flies an airplane, and then you try to get someone to talk around that. Like, what if we used enlisted to fly airplanes? And that's where we're at now. But when that discussion started, you can only imagine the constraints that were placed on them.
Yeah.
mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Excellent. Let's move on to step number 3 here, which is where we're going to just start doing a little bit of synthesis about some of the things we're thinking about ourselves. And so of your identified kryptonites, which ones do you want to prioritize right now to work on? So just think about the stuff you wrote down, and it could even be something someone else mentioned or something that popped up as we were having that debrief. It doesn't. You can create a brand new sticky here. You don't have to drag one over. So just jot down and go ahead and put your name on it, so you can kind of claim it as the thing you want to focus on as for your growth. And then feel free to drop in the chats if you don't have mural abilities, or if you just want me to do it for you. I love the diversity of shapes you guys have for claiming your locations.
Mural's fun to play with. Same with Miro.
You know, Zoom just announced a new whiteboard built into Zoom.
Oh yeah.
No facilitation tools though. But it is more fun to draw on. I'll say that. For some reason, I feel like they've got a little bit more better feel on the actual drawing. You know, one thing that can help too, if you're using tools like this with, you know, a group of either client or teammates, even just putting in little workspaces with their names on it ahead of time gets rid of a little bit of the, you know, people working over top of each other and things. And it makes it, I found it makes the onboarding a little easier. It's harder in these public workshops where we're just kind of, we don't know quite who's going to show up and things, but just pointing that out if y'all are using it for your sessions. All right, if we can finish up those personal kryptonites that you want to work on, I think we've got most people in there. I see Shannon dropped it in the chat, so let me grab that. Also, pro mural tip for you guys: if you hold down either the Alt or the Command key, depending on your OS, it'll clone an object, which is much faster than hitting copy paste. So you can just straight drag or copy over. It's quite handy. All right, excellent. So looks like we got everyone, or everyone that's gonna pick one. So what I want to do now is move to step 4. And in step 4, we're going to think about what steps we can actively take to work on them. So in the case of, I don't know, I know Brian said lack confidence. So I already kind of riffed on a few ideas, like practicing or focusing on the moments. So kind of already gave him a few tips, but so we're going to ask you all just to think about, you know, what are like 1 to 3 steps you might take, and really encourage you to think about the time horizon as well. What might you do in the next 2 days? What might you do in the next 2 weeks, the next 2 months to kind of take some action on this and make some change? So I'm gonna give you a few moments to think about it, and then we'll talk about it, and then see if anything kind of surfaces that others in the room might have advice for you to help with the actions you want to take. And Shannon, you can drop yours in the chats again, and I'll pull them up for you.
haven't figured out how to use it.
What?
So I may have figured out how to post myself.
Oh, nice. All right, I'm gonna set the timer. In a minute, we'll share out our commitments. All right, cool. So let's see here. I'm just going to start. I'm going to kind of navigate the board here. So I see top left, we've got no name, but I'm guessing that's Cuz with the red stickies again. Is that you?
Oh yeah, that's me.
Cool. So
Oh.
what do you have?
So in my head is the weakness I'm trying to work on here. And I put the red stickies around there. So I think a big one for me is just like, I get these mental blocks where I overthink things. What would this person think about that? And so I kind of burrow myself into, back myself up against the wall and then start to pile on these things. And then, next thing you know, it's like, it tends to get out of it. It's like last night I was working on this massive, I'm working on this long-term design sprint, and I got I'm about to present kind of an update to this board, and I just got kind of this massive block, exactly what I'm talking about. And I had to call up actually I called Daniel. I was like, Daniel, I just needed to talk to him. And he told me, he's like, oh yeah, just use this, try to use this tool. And it like unlocked everything, and it was so simple. And so a problem I have is just getting to my head, and it wastes a lot of time, I feel. So, but I like the breathe one. Whoever put that up, thank you.
Welcome.
Breathing
Cool.
breathing
Contribution to-
exercises. Yeah, so that's mine.
Awesome. Any
So-
other tips for Cuz before we move on? I'll just throw out you mentioned reaching out to Daniel. So that seems like a tool you're using. So it might be worth acknowledging that and just being aware of it and saying, hey, I can do that. I can be more intentional and think about who else in my network I might lean in on in moments like that.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate this exercise, because I'm, one of the other kryptonites kind of tied into that, which was like the librarian in me. I had access to the same tools that he gave me. And so understanding that I can help myself in those situations, I just need to gain the muscle memory to go look there.
Yeah.
And leverage, the community and resources that I have.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing. Let's see, Shannon.
All right. I was just trying to contribute. I'm not exactly sure what weakness I was trying to identify, but if I was having trouble, don't be afraid to ask for help. I would try to keep it simple and go with the flow. Use what the team has given you.
always love that. I so often when people are unwilling to ask for help, you know, it's can limit growth. So I think that's great. Any comments for Shannon, for anyone?
We're all social creatures.
Yeah, I hope he's finding it. Like, we're generally just excited to have, you know, other members of the tribe join the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's one of the beauties of Agitare and voltage control, is that you both are building these communities of people who have an interest and a use for these kinds of skills, and are really open about sharing and building each other up. So I think that's, you know, those networks are really great resources to take advantage of, and it's good that Daniel pointed you, Shannon, to that, because
I appreciate it.
that's going to be a community full of people who are active duty and are transitioning out or are out, and you know, that's going to persist. So.
It's almost like a Toastmasters club.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny you say that, because when we first, years ago before the pandemic, when we were, we used to do something that the facilitation lab grew out of, and we did it once a month instead of once a week. And we, at one point, we called it Facilitation Masters. And someone literally showed up thinking it was Toastmasters, and they were ready to present, because we had a sign up sheet and everything, and you could tell, you could indicate how many people you needed for the thing you were doing, and we'd do breakout, because it was once a month in person, and so we'd break people up into little small groups, and they go do their little, and we'd assign people so they could have like a captive audience to do a thing. And so this guy shows up, and he's got his speech ready to go, and I had to sit him down and say, you know, we're very welcoming, and you're welcome to do something except for that.
You are nicer than me. I would have let him go and then explained it.
Yeah, right. Let him, because, well, that's one thing that we always do, is the rose, thorn, bud. Even back then, you know, everyone gets critiqued, because that's the only way you're going to learn. It's not just about practice; it's about practice and reflection. And so, yeah, that would have been pretty brutal, Andy, to make him go through it and then get all all those thorns. Oh man! All right, Greg, you got some stuff here.
Oh, mine's pretty. It's a persistent weakness, which is I have a lot more ambition and energy than the rest of the room does. Like, hey, we can get 20 hours worth of work done in 6 hours, can't we? You know, if you just sort of stay focused and keep doing it. So in the same way that somebody put breathing up there, make sure that you're pacing something in a way that's going to give people a chance to breathe, going to give them a chance to process it in a different way. And so my thing for helping that is just to have somebody. Often it's you know, just like Cuz reached out to Daniel, it's to share my agenda with somebody or my guide and have them take a look at it and say, what do you think? And usually they'll come back and they say, there's no way you're going to get all this done. You know, there's some other sort of, so that's a relationship habit, you know, of working in relationship with somebody else, collaborating with other people, reaching out to them. Just from maybe a skill standpoint, there's also just understanding that about myself, putting on so if I think it's going to take 10 minutes, I probably ought to schedule 15. If I think it's going to take 20, I probably ought to schedule 25, you know, putting a little buffer in there, just to allow, I mean, nobody ever complained when something ended early. So if you have a time buffer and you get done early, they'll be happy. They always complain when it runs late. Right? So.
No, Greg, I chuckled when I saw this, because it is so pervasive that we have it as part of our agenda checklist, and the checklist item is remove something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
because everyone has something extra in their agenda.
That's why I wrote the chopping block.
You're
Yeah.
100% the normal.
There's a saying that is, there
160.
comes a point where every addition is an amputation.
Right? Yeah.
Like,
Well,
okay,
let me ask you this, Greg. Have you ever gotten feedback from one of your facilitations where it was like it wasn't enough?
no.
So
I mean, sometimes the client might tell you that, especially if it's training, because a lot of times they're also having the same mindset we are, because they're L&D
Mhm.
people, or they're just responsible for trying to get to some outcome, and they want to jam a bunch. They just want to cram as much information as they can in, but it's just not how it works.
What you do get in from the client, this is building off of what Douglas just said, not when you're actually facilitating, but this is in the design of the session, is
Yeah.
you get a client who says, look, we've only got 2 hours, but this is what we need to get done. And it's like, yeah, what you're saying you need to get done is a 2-week project, and we can't get that done in 2 hours. And you just have to be real about it and say, let's talk about what part of that 2-week project you want to get done in the 2 hours we've got. Because if that's all we got, that's what we got. So what's the most important thing we could possibly accomplish in the time that we're together, that you'll be happy with, that you'll feel like we got something done? You know, and that can be difficult in certain situations to say no to somebody, but you're always better off for saying no than for saying yes and having it fall apart, right?
Committing.
All right. Speaking of ending on time, I'm gonna have to crank here. Chris, you want to share your plan?
Yeah, it's just kind of like using planning to, well, I kind of want to just say plan for other people to fail and let me down, because that seems to be like the recurring theme is like I get engaged on something, I go to work on it, I'll deliver, and then 2 months later somebody's like, hey, did you send me that thing? And I'm like, yeah, I sent you that thing and 30 other things, and you were supposed to deliver something back, but you never did. And I know I've got the edge of, that's why I did the sharp red around around it on the other board. So maybe what I could try to do is in the spirit of kind of collaborative planning, hey, what do you feel you can deliver? What do you think is reasonable for you to deliver given your workload? Try to give them that grace, not knowing what level of tasking they have or anything. And then challenge the value of the whole thing, of the whole reason though, the thing that I want from them at all, just to, hey, is this really that important? Because if I can't justify it to myself, oh, that's a good one. Thank you, Cuss. If I can't justify it to myself, then how can I expect somebody else to care about it? So,
all right. In the speed of time, if you have other thoughts for Chris, drop them in as stickies so he can reflect there. And I'm going to move on to Rob here. And Rob, what's your commitment?
Yeah, I don't do like a lot of traditional facilitation, but I sit in a lot of meetings. And so earlier I was just kind of talking about this tendency I have to underplan. And so I think a lot of my work is going to be, how do I, make the meetings that I'm in more effective? I mean, I really kind of stick back to Doug, when you were talking about like why meetings fail. I probably need to look into that a little bit more, but that's something that I want to do is, have clear purpose, use facilitation tools in meetings. Thanks. And then kind of thinking about the flow of meetings, because that is an area that I tend to spend a lot of time in.
Excellent. Another thing, I'll just say, because you said you don't really do a lot of facilitation, but I will say that in our book Magical Meetings, we say there's no such thing as bad meetings, just bad facilitators, because people don't take meetings seriously. And if you call the meeting, you're facilitating, whether you think of yourself as a facilitator or not. And if more people start taking that role seriously, then meetings will improve. So that's just something a little, and the fact the work you're talking about is taking the job of facilitation seriously. So that's awesome. Let's see, we got 2 more. Andy.
So my biggest thing, I'm gonna parrot cuss a little bit. It's really like lean on my communities and stop trying to be the only person measuring, what my sense of value is. So yeah, or I guess it could even go with what Craig's saying, like talk to people who live in reality once in a while and find out that I'm just not being reasonable, even with my personal expectations.
I love it. Kind of comes back into that, like, we're unbiased, but we're also biased.
Yeah.
So if any bias is there, we might as well tune that bias so that we're aware of what we're doing. I love it.
It's I see Brian. I think we are in all of the exact same Slack spaces, and I see him interacting in like the design warfare Slack, and I'm like, I would not get the impression that he had confidence issues. So it's largely a perspective thing.
Yeah, that's the
I
classic
100%
imposter
do.
syndrome. All right, Brian, you're our last one, and it's interesting that the person without the confidence goes last and has to run end the show. So
No pressure.
Yeah, it definitely just basically comes from lack of practice. I haven't hosted a whole lot of meetings or facilitation stuff yet. I think is the key factor, and it basically comes down to practice makes perfect.
we like to say practice makes practice.
You gotta hit those failure reps.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then what was this? Someone said low stakes. Oh yeah, ride-alongs
stake,
are another
yeah.
one. Yeah.
Right along.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, if someone's gonna do something cool, like see if you can show up and kind of watch what they're doing.
Yeah, friendly.
I try
friendly
to jump
ghosts.
on all those. If I could
Excellent.
follow Danny Holter around all day, then I would be happy.
That sounds exhausting, though.
Yeah,
It would be, yeah.
I don't think that's the road to happiness.
Hey,
It's not the road
before
to
you guys,
happiness, it's the road to confidence. Come on.
well, it could be.
I think your brain would explode like 5 times a day.
Man.
Awesome. Well, hey, I know Cuz probably has some words, and I was just gonna say thanks for hanging with me today and suffering through my technical issues. But I think we had some fun and unpacked a few things. And if please stay in touch. I'm on LinkedIn, and I would love to connect and reach out and ask me questions anytime. And we do lab every Thursday. It's free to attend, and you can come and play and learn. So, Cuz, over to you.
Douglas.
Yeah.
Just
You
for-
got there.
just for Douglas, he needs to see this.
Yes.
Nice.
Hello.
Keeping those feet warm.
Well-
Douglas sent me the most unusual gift that I've ever received after running a session, which was some slippers.
It's always a little uncomfortable when I say, "What's your shoe size?" And people are always like, well, "I'm not sure why you're asking," but
That's definitely an important thing for staying on your feet,
Yeah.
Greg. So,
Yeah, no.
well, thanks, Douglas, for being our 10th, helping host our 10th Fishbowl. Happy to have it, and this is really great, beneficial. So, Rob, and for anybody, and Shannon, if you're not in our Slack channel, I put some links in the chat here. One is Agitare, that's our story, and then 2 is the Airtable link that'll help you get into our Slack channels. There's actually a channel specifically for meeting design. And so if you're looking for a place to get resources, then that might be something to help you out. I also put it in the voltage control website there. Douglas has a lot of great resources on his website, and also, like you said, hosts those weekly trainings, which are massively beneficial and are open source. So thank you everybody for joining. And then Douglas, real quick before we go, is there a way for us to save this board?
oh
here?
yeah, the mural. I can.
Yeah.
I'll just hit it. Generate a. It'll generate a PDF, and I'll email it to you.
Perfect. Alrighty, y'all. Well, it was a pleasure hanging out with you on this Friday afternoon. I hope you all have a great weekend.
Thanks, y'all.
Woo! Yep.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Douglas. Thanks, guys.
Good to see everybody.